You're having bread delivery, they have these, they're called, I forget what she called them.
We ready to go on? Yep. Ron? Good evening, everybody. It is 19:03. It is Monday, October 9th, and we're in the municipal board of the board room of the municipal building in downtown Hanover, where we're going to do good work for the town and have fun. We do not have, just running through the agenda. Number one, we don't, agenda reviews. Number three, we don't have any public hearings tonight. We do have a proclamation, and then we will do, after that, we'll do public comment. We will get an update on the budget, talk about the select board goal setting workshop coming up soon, and then talk about the CIPC, parking rate changes and lot hours, and then move to the consent items, which have changed a little bit, yes.
And I think there was one item that we wanted to...
Right, number 3, correct?
Yeah.
7D3?
So, yep.
Got it. And then we'll have reports. So, calling us to order, may we need to start with the proclamation for one of our dearly missed workers, town employees. And this is a proclamation that I'm reading into the record for recognizing Wayne Pekarsky for 17 years of service and achievements working for the Hanover Department of Public Works. Whereas Wayne Pekarsky began his career with the town's facilities division in the Public Works Department on January 20th, 2006, a time when the town was struggling to professionally maintain its facilities. And whereas Wayne began his full-time employment with the town, working with former building superintendent Frank Austin first as a custodian. Wayne, after demonstrating his abilities, was promoted to head custodian, responsible for managing 2 other custodians. Wayne came to the town with a great passion for cleaning and maintaining the town's buildings. He did an excellent job keeping the Howe Library in pristine condition, which wasn't easy, given the volume of patrons. He helped with all the town buildings when called upon, covering for other custodians when they were out. He particularly took great pride in and was exceptionally skilled at polishing floors. He was well liked by fellow employees and public officials he interacted with. Whereas the town will miss Wayne's talent, wit, smile, and eagerness to help in any situation he was called upon. His passing was a shock and is a big loss for his family, friends, and the community. Wayne's dedication, work ethic, pride, and skills were rare and will be difficult to replace. Now therefore I, Athos Rasius, on behalf of the Select Board, community members, and employees of the town of Hanover, do hereby issue this proclamation in recognition of his many years of exemplary service to the town. Very sad recognizing a wonderful person and employee. So now we move on to item number 5, which is public comment. Just to remind folks, we do have rules with respect to public comment. We're asking folks to limit themselves to 5 minutes and if this pertains to issues already on the agenda, we ask that they refrain from or speak later in the agenda and direct questions to me if there are any. Is there anyone available or wishes to speak in public comment? David?
name's David Vincelette. I live at 93 Lebanon Street, Hanover. I've lived there since 1984 when I graduated from Dartmouth. I've been here resident since 1980 when I came here to go to school. And it's been 15 months I've been trying to get a call back from the new town manager. He's been hired for $160,000 a year. I'm paying $5,000 in taxes, and he can't find his way to a telephone. And I'm wondering if there's some reason he won't call me back.
David,
You're the select board. He works for you. Is he
David,
supposed to answer phone calls, or does the public have no right to talk to the town manager?
David, let me look into this a little bit further I'm not prepared to answer at this moment.
I've been talking to you about this for months. It's been 15 months he hasn't returned a phone call. How long do you have to think about it?
I don't have an answer for that at the moment, David.
You don't have answers for anything. I know that. You were required not to answer my questions by the previous town head of this committee. Made an agreement with you all that you wouldn't answer questions, but that's. I've tried to let Mr. Thorpe know that he was hired by criminals who first polluted local waters in violation of state and federal law, in violation of the Clean Water Act. They were caught by the state and asked to change the way they dumped asphalt waste adjacent to water streams that had been polluted. Then the town held human beings without natural rights to liberty. The right to liberty is God-given. It's enshrined in our Constitution. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It's a God-given right. The town had no right to hold my family in a concentration camp for 2 years and treat us as slaves. That was a violation of state and federal law too. Are you ever going to apologize for that? How long do you need to think about it?
I'm not going to address that.
It's been a few years since you agreed to have us chained or fenced into our property. Do you have any answer to are you sorry? Have you thought about it? Do you think it's proper for human beings to be held in violation of the law?
Not going to address that.
Is that a hard question for you?
Not going to address that, David.
That's too tough? Dartmouth College has a new vice president for a new community and government engagement position. I've been calling Emma Wolf since shortly after she was interviewed by Alex Torpy, and she has never called me back as well. So I guess Dartmouth and Hanover share a lot. Both are good at silencing victims of crime and abusing underrepresented minorities. Today is a special day, Indigenous Peoples Day. Dartmouth and Hanover have used the symbol of the Indian for many years, and Hanover still has it, even up on the sign right here in this hallway, even though I've asked for over 5 years that it be taken down. Peter Christie agreed that this symbol needs to go, that the town needs to get rid of it, but I see no sign that anything is changing. And the fact that you hold a meeting on Indigenous Peoples Day with the symbol of the Native American still flying high makes me wonder about your interest in the indigenous people. Now, recently, I've asked Mr. Torpy to take an interest in the problems I've had with the town. He's refused. My wife is a native Ukrainian. She, her daughter, and our grandson are now living here in America, inside of the concentration camp. The fence all around us, except they finally opened the door so we can drive in and out. The abuse of my wife is a Ukrainian Jew who's been abused, and even though she came to America to escape a system that was horrible, and our daughter and grandson are refugees with federal recognition of their refugee status, they live in a second-class situation. And it needs to end. The fence needs to be taken down, apologies need to be made, and some people need to start talking and not hold people silent and refuse to answer questions. Is my 5 minutes run out yet?
You got another minute, David.
Oh, good. I'd like to ask you once again, who was responsible? Who made the decision to put asphalt waste and coal tar into the public's water supply? My water supply. Do you have to get some more time to look into that too?
I'm not going to address that now, David.
Can you ask Mr. Torpy to call me?
Let me look into that one, David. I'll get back to you on that. Is there anyone else for public comment tonight? Seeing none. Now we're moving into agenda item number 6, which has a couple of points in it. The first one being our fiscal year 24-25 budget update. Alex, you want to get started on that?
Sure. So don't have a ton, but wanted to just basically check in where we're at in the process and go over a couple of the dates that are coming up and ask a question or two about what folks are looking for. So we have a select board meeting a week from tonight, so next Monday. That meeting is primarily related to Mink Brook Community Forest, a community workforce housing project. We have our goal setting workshop on Wednesday the 18th. And everybody received those materials, right? Okay.
Yep.
You get the soothing sounds of Alex Torpy in your ear if you haven't gotten that far yet.
I like the birds chirping.
I thought that was a nice touch. I got the birds in. It was quite a situation.
And I did like your haircut from the COVID era. Mine was really long too.
Yeah, I kind of liked it too. It just looks a little,
A little too COVID-y.
Yeah, a little too like you haven't seen a barber in a year or two. And so I sent out some materials for the board to review, which is basically just a kind of vision setting, goal setting process that everybody's going to work on, and then we're going to put together, and I'm going to come into the meeting on the 18th, having done some review of that. I'll bring in all the things that everybody submits as well, so everybody can see everybody else's, but also just going to try and do a little bit of reconciliation of some goals and priorities before then. Then on the next day, we have a department head meeting that is a couple hour long. It's sort of a half-day meeting where we are going over a whole bunch of things related to very, very early, thoughts about our retention and recruitment study and compensation plans for the coming year. And then over the next week or two, we'll be tweaking some of that based on feedback from department heads. And then on November 6th, coming into the select board, and we will have a non-public discussion related to collective bargaining strategy and some of the initial proposals coming out from the compensation study. On the 6th also, in the public portion of the meeting, we would anticipate having a conversation about a couple different pieces related to the budget. One definitely being ARPA, and if we want to set a public hearing for a subsequent meeting in November, right, the goal, and it's complicated because the ARPA spending priorities, some of which we decided last year, some of those are kind of more operating related, some of those are more capital related, so it doesn't fit perfectly into the budget process. But the idea is that we want to get all of that money committed by the end of this calendar year. Even though legally we have another year, I've mentioned before the advice that we've gotten from NHMA, especially considering how large of a pot of money we have, is to get that out the door this year, committed for projects. Otherwise, the money can be taken back by the federal government. So on November 6th, I know, so we'll be discussing some of the compensation stuff in non-public. We'll be discussing some of the ARPA stuff. We had talked a little bit about that being the sort of tax rate targeting discussion. I know, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what people's expectations were for, or what we're going to cover, or what information you all will have for that meeting on November 6th. So that's one of my kind of questions.
Typically for that meeting, in the past, we've indeed, set a tax rate range. It hasn't been a specific number usually. Sometimes it has been, but most frequently it's been a range. And based on a bunch, multiple different factors, including predicted revenues, predicted expenditures, inflationary predictions, and an overall concept of where the taxpayers are with regard to ability to sustain alterations in the tax rate.
Right. And so I think one of the things that Ellen and I had talked a little bit about is, as far as producing something to have for the 6th, is sort of some of the biggest red flag kind of things that we see on the radar. So like, we know our healthcare costs are going up by double-digit amounts. We have the sort of maximum of what that would be, and that's a big number, and we know what that number is at this point, as much as we've been told by Health Trust. We have a couple other things like that that are pretty big, that are just big lines that we can sort of write that up and provide that ahead of time. Is that sort of what you're...
Yeah, that's helpful. And then some indication of where we think basically the local economy is going.
And this sort of gap between what expenses we think are going up and what revenues we might have to cover it.
And then also I think the last couple of years, we've had large draws from undesignated fund balance.
Yes,
right.
So I think last year was over $400,000. So if we're going to not do that this year, I know that the implication of that is obviously higher taxes. So sussing that out, because that's a big variable, but I don't know that we yet know what the undesignated fund balance was at the end of the year. So I mean, we would kind of need to know that if we're thinking about using something, how much. Yes.
I don't require that I don't remember we promised not to use undesignated fund balances. I mean, we've said it's not a good practice to carry on, but I don't recall that we've set that in stone prior to taking a look at the entire circumstance.
Oh, and I'm not suggesting that we have we're coming off a couple of years where we've used
a lot,
400, 500,000. So if we didn't do that, then all else being equal, the tax rate would go up significantly just to cover what previously we had used from undesignated fund balance.
Alex, it also has helped us in previous years. Again, this is because it's so early in everybody's budget process, but just to be able to get a sense of what is happening with the largest institutions in town, DH and the college, maybe hypothermia, whatever, to just make a couple of calls to their GMs or their HR people and find out what their, I mean, we don't follow anybody else's in lockstep, but we're always asked, well, how does the town fit in terms of the other major puzzle pieces.
This is compensation related for
Yes.
staff or just?
No,
Yeah,
it's the whole things that has to do with tax rates. In other words, yes, what employees are expected to be earning, and what the size of their budgets will be in the following year by a percentage point. And maybe they don't have that information. They certainly usually at this point have a sense of what their union contracts are like.
And is that a conversation related to the schools as well, as far as tax impact?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what? Because we might be able to get compensation information from some of them, but we also, this is going to be our most data-driven year because we just are finishing the study with a whole bunch of employers.
Right.
I just want to make sure we're getting the right. But there is an interest in getting a general amount that their budget is changing?
No, I mean, it's normally, okay, what's everyone else giving for raises?
Yeah.
You know, how
Right,
much,
that's
how
what
are we gonna, is it gonna be a 1%, a no percent, a 4%?
Right.
A 6%, and often, it's public information, you hear about it. It's information that can easily be gathered, and so if the hospital's giving
2%.
2%?
2%. We just got an email for the non-physician employees.
2%, and the college is giving 2%, for the town to give 8%, just, it doesn't go over well, it goes into the mix. It doesn't necessarily, as Nancy said, it doesn't necessarily say, okay, because DH and Dartmouth and Hypertherm are giving 2%,
Right.
That means we should only give 2%, but it also helps us decide, well, if everyone's getting 2%, how do we feel about raising taxes by 6%, for example. So, it's just another data point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And yes, then the schools too. And the schools have budget guidance documents that also go through some of that.
Okay.
Was that helpful?
I think so. I think we can put together a 1 or 2 page with some of the biggest highlights. And so it won't be a sort of budget calculation necessarily, but some of the big ticket items that we know are happening. And that would include also looking at the grand list and, talking to Norm and basically, are we, within generally what we're expecting, or are we going way up or way down? We might want to know that if he knows at this point. So there might be a couple things like that is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And just try to get those fleshed out a little bit and get that to you all before the 6th. And then, I think we can do that.
And the fees for rebuilding, what do they call it, the permit fees, right? That's the one.
Yeah,
Had
the
one
building
from
permits.
Dartmouth, right? There was a huge number a few years ago.
Yeah.
So
Not
where
so much
that,
this year, maybe.
Not this year.
not so much.
No, there might be something.
Okay. Meals and rooms tax, auto vehicle, some of the big revenue drivers.
So, some of those, but some of those are also would be done by the departments through the budgeting process, which we haven't quite gotten to yet.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I think big picture, like if someone knows there's something way off, up or down, we might know that now. But
planning will be able to tell you based
Right.
on what we've all read in the news.
Right.
So they should have a pretty good handle, because Dartmouth is usually a big driver of
Right.
those fees. So.
Okay. Well, we'll put together what we can, and yeah. And that was really it on the budget side, unless people had any questions. The only thing other thing I'll mention is just that the CIPC will be meeting throughout the time. That little timeline I just described. The CIPC will be meeting. We have our first meeting on Friday this week. And so once we get to that November meeting and we are able to have the conversation about compensation and collective bargaining and all that, at that point we'll then begin soliciting everything from department heads. So all that stuff will start coming to us in the beginning of November. And so, we're on track for the sort of schedule that we laid out maybe a meeting or 2 ago so far.
Great. And shall we move move on to talking about the goal setting workshop, or we kind of?
Yeah, the only thing,
Yeah,
I was just gonna
yeah.
see if anybody had any questions, just as a
So-
check-in before we go ahead, but
I kind of
that's it.
panicked and thought the deadline was yesterday,
Oh,
so.
that would've been quick.
So I did look through almost everything that you sent out, and I found it very helpful, very interesting. And that also got me looking into other materials, including looking at what we have available for the master plan, which I found,
And those links work for everybody?
yes.
Okay.
And I'm just emphasizing to people that this prep does take time, and that's why I was panicking last
Right.
night, because I started first thing in the morning, and then I got busy, and then I got back to it later on, and I realized there was no way I could do it in one day. It's going to take several hours to get through all this stuff, and I think it's going to be a very useful exercise, and I look forward to it.
There is, planning board is holding its public outreach
Right,
on Wednesday as
the
well.
same, right.
Yeah, Nancy's
saw
going
that.
to that first.
But yeah.
I think you're going to Sustainable Hanover, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're going to Sustainable Hanover.
So that's a
This
busy
is
day.
This is the master plan, is, the Sustainable Master Plan Committee is hosting 2 days of public stop by for public comment
Great.
at the Howe Library. And I think it's
The 18th and 19th.
the 18th and 19th.
Do you
What are
remember
the,
what time?
yeah, what are the
I
hours?
have it.
I have it, but
I have to look it up.
somewhere.
Excuse me. Is that in the morning?
It's all day, so you can just stop by and there'll be, there are 10 chapters and there's people there to talk about each chapter if you want.
Do you know?
And so that's a great idea for you all too,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about reviewing stuff, yeah.
Agree.
Even though-
Although it's right before me,
Yeah,
but looking at what we have available for the master plan, I found just a rich source of everything. Planning. You don't know when it starts.
It's like at 10 in the morning till like 6 at night.
Okay, so we
I
start at
think it
11.
starts,
And then the other day, the 19th is shorter.
yeah,
In the morning, it's 9 to
it's
12.
9 to
Yeah,
12.
9 to 12 on the 19th.
10 o'clock on the, well, I can stop by beforehand. That's at the Howe.
Yeah.
Planning board.
And we should make sure that gets announced well on the website and through our email distribution list. Like it should get a post, so it's really front and center, as well as on the calendar, as well as out in the email.
So I have Carrie sent it around earlier today. So it's on Wednesday, the 18th, it is 11:30 to 5:30 p.m. in the mayor room at the Howe Library. And on Thursday, the 19th, it is 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Same place in the mayor room at Howe Library.
Well, I can go after. Okay. Okie dokie.
and we did figure out a location, which is we're gonna be in room 204 in the class of 53 Commons, so that'll also make it easier for you all to get lunch, because we're gonna start food at the beginning.
Room 204?
204. And so I'll send you the secret passcode to get free food. If I don't think I did already. And then any member of the public, obviously, who wants to come in doesn't have to get food. They can just come up.
So basically you go into the building and you stay to the left and there's a set of stairs and you go up to the stairs and it's on your right. But there's signage up there.
Room 204, or what used to be called
Thayer Dining.
Okay.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Why do they just call it there?
Because the class of 53 paid for the renovations.
And we can also
I used to
grab a
work there.
sandwich down below before we leave.
I'm gonna wait
Yeah,
there.
it's a all you can eat, so you can get whatever you want.
If you go in and stay there.
Well, Alex said that they'll have our names, so when you go in, you can get, we'll pay for our
Secret password.
food because it's $12. Anyone can have lunch there. You just have to pay with a credit card. So,
All right. So I think we're done with item number 6. And that moves us to item number 7. And the first one here is something Alex and I brought up, we talked about, which is the CIPC initial term setting. We didn't set term limits for this. Remember, these folks are appointed. We did appoint, didn't we?
We appointed,
Yeah,
we just didn't
yeah.
give them terms because we
Right,
didn't know, and I
right.
think the suggestion that we just have a year appointment and we reassess after a year makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then we
I don't know.
then potentially.
You guys talked, does that make sense to you?
Didn't know about that, but sure.
I mean, I don't know.
We can always reappoint if we so
Yeah.
choose, yeah.
Yeah, and then Alex was
Sounds
talking
great.
about staggering appointments over time, meaning sort of like we do on the select board. Where,
Different terms.
Yeah.
That's some of the, recommendations we got.
And maybe have bylaws, like how the committee runs, since those are like standard procedures, like we've talked to Hanover
Yeah,
Block.
I think we're supposed to set those in the first meeting, which we'll have on Friday. And hopefully get to establish those. We can bring the ones that we approve for Hanover Bike Walk, if that's interesting.
Can you send this to me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So do we need to vote on this? I
Mhm.
suppose we do.
Well, do we want to make them all 1 year, or do we want to stagger
To
them?
start with, yeah.
We don't want to stagger them to start with.
Why don't we, the suggestion was, and I think it's reasonable, you can certainly argue differently, people could vote differently, to start off with 1 year, basically to see how the committee goes, and then figure out from there. I think that it will also reflect the composition of, I think the evaluation will also reflect the composition. Do we have enough people? Do we have the right people? Things like that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That's fine.
So, I move that we set the initial terms for the members of the CIPC to 1 year, and then to be evaluated. Well, a year's going to be here pretty darn quickly. So we have to remember to bring this back to the board to set to evaluate and
Reappoint.
reappoint, but also redesignate terms.
Yeah.
And maybe
Are we
in the
thinking
bylaws.
of like aligning all of the committees, so we do it all within the similar month, or? Because then we won't have to like remember a scattered schedule.
That's a good idea.
Do the reappointment.
Like we do our
Train.
fees and schedules.
Those to do it all at the same time,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, let's
Doesn't
for
that make
July
sense?
1.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
maybe we
sure.
could do July 1, then that's after select board, the reorganization meeting. Maybe it should be August 1,
Yeah, so it won't, yeah.
after the select board like
Okay,
figures
so-
itself out and then.
Okay.
Yeah, the
appointed.
for
select
this
board
one-
has to do its governance, right?
I'm
And
sorry,
then
what did you say,
the
Jenny?
select board has to set up its, whatever it's
Right.
doing.
right.
And then a month later, we
Yeah.
do the appointments.
So that's right.
Does that
we
make
need-
sense?
Yeah.
It does, yep.
I think so.
So for this committee, when is I didn't actually put in the motion, I just sort of made. When are we starting and ending this year? You haven't had your first meeting yet, right?
Correct.
This
Friday,
Friday.
it's October. Should we set it for August then? Which is not really a year, but,
Yeah, so we'll do a 9-month,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
To expire,
yeah.
In 9 months, and we'll reappoint,
okay.
and that's when we'll do all of the board appointments.
Okay.
So
Get
July,
that, Alex?
expires
Yeah,
July
I
So,
think
like-
I think so.
Hanover Bike
Alright.
Walk.
Yeah.
What other committees?
We'll have to
could
figure,
be-
yeah, those are all, that's gonna be a little bit of work, but doable.
And some of this stuff we had talked about in the prior meeting, that our new senior assistant clerk, who's starting tomorrow,
True.
is going to help organize a little bit of this. So I may ask her to take the lead on getting some.
Excellent first project.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome. Help us clean this up, please.
All right, so is there a second to my sloppy
second.
motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. And then we have more talking about parking. Oh yes, this is something we didn't take up last week because we didn't notice it. So there were two suggestions. And the first has to do with parking in the parking garage on Saturdays. Do you want to bring this up, Alex? Currently, it's free.
Yeah.
I'm just reading your note.
Yeah,
basically, we've talked about this at least 2 or 3 times.
We
now.
have, and now is the attempt to do it kind of
Right.
properly by voting on it, which we hadn't done previously. So there's 3 different things that we had talked about. One was the parking garage, which is right now it's self-policed on Saturday. We do have in the budget a staff person to work there, but we have not had that position filled in a while. The idea is to just make it free on Saturdays, and that is a $100 or $200 a week loss, something that parking is not particularly concerned about. And if we actually eliminated the hours for that position, we would save money. The second was, and I got a little confused here, maybe between the 2 lots that we were talking about, which is lot 7. I don't think there was an objection or concern among the select board about lot 7 going back to 10 hours.
Excuse me, that's the one down by the
Black Family Vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's no issue with that one.
And then the one that I think there was some questions about, and then I asked those questions to our parking staff as well, which was the Bank of America fleet deck, which is the one out behind Town Hall here. And I think there was concern that that was not the right lot to be 10 hours, that it was too close to downtown. I will say I did talk to our parking staff, and I do have a few numbers here. So one is they said, it's amazing because they know all the cars now by sight. I mean, they're out there every single day, and there's a solid, half a dozen to dozen cars that are now in that lot that are not in the 3-hour lots right behind Town Hall. So they did move a handful of cars a little further. There was a concern that they do get filled up, and I've got 4 different days where they took counts. And there was between 10 and 20 spaces open in that lot every day. So I just wanted to throw out there that their take on it is that the 10 hours there already has successfully been moving, not a lot, but 5 or 10 cars out of spaces closer to businesses and a little bit further. But I know that was the one that there were some questions around.
So is it the entire upper deck? This is the Dartmouth parking deck, and the town manages the top deck. And so you're talking about converting all of the top deck to 10 hours, or just a portion of it?
Just the top.
Yeah, the bottom is...
The bottom we don't do, right.
The town doesn't
Right.
manage.
So yeah, top to 10 hours.
And is that because the Maynard lot is full? Because that's a 10-hour lot. That's the one next to it. I think it's called Maynard. No, it's
It's a Marshall lot.
Marshall lot.
That I'm not sure. So this was prompted from parking because they've been noticing the same cars getting tickets over and over again throughout the day in the lot directly back here. And so the idea was that if we could move some of those people, they don't want to go too far, but they are clearly parking for more than 3 hours, and on a pretty regular basis, we could move them there and open up those, again, it's not a lot of spaces, but 5 or 10 spaces a day, it sounds like. And so they said that, they've noticed it immediately and actually have had 1 or 2 conversations with drivers, where they run into people and say, people are, I need to park longer. Well, why do I keep getting a ticket? Well, right over there, 10 hours. And then, oh, okay, I'll do that tomorrow. So
I'm confused. I'm sorry. Now what you just said made what you just said is it's 3 hours now.
it was 3 hours. So we switched it over, and then we wanted to come back here and vote. The signs already went up. And we decided to not take the signs down and put the signs back up again. So the signs are up right now. So they've noticed in the last...
Excuse me, Alex, I'm being very thick. What did the signs say right now?
The signs say what we're proposing to do.
Up to 10 hours.
So it's the 10 hours on the Bank of America fleet lock deck, the top level back in the corner there. So that says 10 hours. And in the last 2 weeks, since it said 10 hours, we've gotten this 5 or 10 cars from the spots directly behind Town Hall that are now parking there on a daily basis.
Okay, now I understand you.
So they're saying parking feels like it's a tentative success and would love to give it a little more time because they think some of the cars, again, that are right behind like where Molly's is, like right there, are now in the corner.
Okay.
And so
it seems to make sense to me. Other people.
I just want to mention, I had a conversation with Chris about this, our parking supervisor, and I was surprised that his count had as many vacant spots, because I've been up there several times and not been able to park.
Yeah,
And
I walk by
it
and it
was-
tends to be full, and 10 to 20 spots seems like a lot. Are they
Yeah.
using the park mobile data, or is this a physical count, and what time of day is it? I have a lot of,
It would have to be, I'm not sure, it would have, because there's no meters there, so it can't be,
Correct.
yeah.
well, there's a,
Yeah,
what
it's
do you
Park
mean?
Mobile
It's
though.
park mobile, I'm a little confused.
Right.
That's what we refer to as a meter when there's not a physical meter. We don't really have physical meters anymore. We just have park
Park Mobile.
mobile. So our metered spaces are just, you know, things that have some place to pay near the parking spot that we pay by hour.
Yeah, my impression was this was visual because when we talked about it, he described specific cars that he's seen out there.
Right.
So
I also was wondering, you said it's like $100 to $200 of revenue per week. Is that $5,000 to $10,000 a year then from the garage?
for Saturdays.
Yeah. And how long have we not had somebody there?
That I don't know.
I think it's been a while, yeah. I haven't
I
been
don't
there
know.
much on Saturdays, but.
And I have a question maybe for you guys, because you might know, but why is the garage not park mobile?
I think it just hasn't been converted over time.
Okay.
I think it's, the whole process has been, it's taken time to.
To
the
roll it
Park
out.
Mobile. But I'm not, I mean, I think that's a good question
It's a
to
very
go
good
back
question,
and,
Jenny.
and say, hey, yeah, why don't we do that? And then we may have some
That's a good
other.
question, Jenny.
It just seems like there's a lot of 10-hour spaces there, or all day.
Well, it's a different rate, right? So you pay Park Mobile for 10 hours surface, it's like $5. And if you pay more than 2 hours at the parking garage, it's $15. So
Yeah,
there's a different rate structure,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it just seems like if we're talking about people are not using the garage enough, which we have been in some conversations, and that costs more than the surface lot that's very convenient, maybe that's the key.
That would cause that.
Yeah. I just question, you know, when I walk by, maybe I'm walking at the same time as Nancy.
But you're not together.
I haven't seen you there, so I don't know. I tend to be there after the lunch crowd, but it's still full, like around 2:30. I know
So-
our peak, I know is, has previously been between 12 and 2. But that has been the historic peak parking demand in Hanover. It may have shifted since the pandemic.
So I can ask him to take a look at some after, these numbers are all late morning because.
I feel like if we just had the park mobile data, since that, I mean, they trade in data, that's their jam, right? collect
Yeah,
that
although it's,
data.
I mean, it's close enough that I would just recommend we do look at it visually because not everybody uses Park Mobile, so. But I can ask him to do an early
No,
afternoon.
everybody has to use Park
I
Mobile.
don't understand.
Well, there are.
No.
You mean
no.
the.
Yeah, I don't think
No.
so. I think you can just pay with your credit card.
Yeah, but they have the data.
It
Right.
has.
Do they?
Park Mobile has the data. and-
So I guess I would
Yeah.
defer to how parking wants to collect it, but I would say if your concern is that there is if you're there in the early, these are all late morning, and their idea was that anybody who's parking there for 10 hours by 11 or 12 is probably
Is already
parking
there.
there. So you might be looking at 2, and I can ask him to go check it too, regardless of which way we do it, but to go check it too. But my guess is that many of those cars will be turnover, those are not 10 hours, but I can see if there's a way for us to know that. Because he was saying that, you know, by 11 or 12, it's not full. And it sounds like both of you are there a couple hours later and it is more full.
Well, yeah,
So-
peak demand is 12 to 2, and peak demand is when, like, it's important to a lot of our restaurants where people eat lunch, that there is some parking close by that's available.
And that's the goal of trying to get some of the longer term parkers out of the spaces closer and into that lot. So ideally that lot would be full, but then there'd be more turnover spaces available. That would be the goal.
Okay, so do people feel like they need a little bit more information on that last one? Is that reasonable, Alex?
Can we just talk about the parking structure,
Yeah,
the Saturday, adding Saturdays. So we have a deficit for the parking fund that we're trying to work off. So I know you said it's not very much, it's $5,000 to $10,000, but is this the time to cut the revenue to the parking fund?
I think the trade-off there is a benefit. I mean, we have a lot of concerns about the ease of parking in the downtown, and if we can eliminate the staff salary related to the position, I think we'll come out ahead. I mean, that's going to be more than $5,000 or $10,000 a year for that, for every Saturday for the year. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head.
We haven't been paying that staff salary.
It's still in the budget.
it is budgeted though.
Right.
Right. So we would be able to remove it from the budget, regardless of whether we're paying it or not.
We can remove it anyway. We don't, I mean, it's generating.
Not if we were continuing to enforce it.
We're generating revenue without enforcement. We could further generate revenue if we put Park Mobile in the garage, which doesn't require a human to be there. And then also it would accept credit cards, which has been some of the feedback that I've gotten from people. When they don't pay, it's because they don't have cash and they would like to pay. If there were a way for someone to take their plastic, which Park Mobile would allow.
So I'll just throw out that, I mean, what we were trying to do here is a couple of simple things to make a positive benefit to especially the business owners who've struggled a lot over the last couple of years through COVID. And that we want to try and make it easier. We're trying to do a campaign about making it easier to come and park. We have signs up around town about when parking is free. And we're also trying to figure out in the longer term how to have conversations about doing a whole lot of things differently, which our parking staff are very interested in doing, but we haven't really had that conversation. And so what I would just say is I would recommend personally spending little time trying to make a few small changes that might have a positive benefit, coming back and then reevaluating the whole thing. I don't think we're going to need an outside consultant that we've done in the past. We can figure this out internally. For example, you know, we've had conversations with a bunch of other towns and cities in New Hampshire about different ways that we can structure parking, you know, to do progressive parking rates in the meters in the downtown, like what Portsmouth does, which is where you actually can't get a ticket if you use an app. You just pay a higher hourly rate every hour, and that they did do some data collection on that and found that it created more turnover in their spaces than previously, which was a flat rate and then issuing tickets. It also feels a little friendlier. That's one of like 20 things that we've talked about with parking staff, and what I'm trying to do is actually defer almost all of those things until next year potentially. But if there was just a few small things without a ton of, you know, consternation that we could do to make things a little easier, that was the goal with these three things. And then we need to pick up a larger conversation. We used to have a park and transportation board that we don't have anymore. It was clear after meeting with the parking staff and getting some immediate ideas off the top of their head about ways that we could improve, that we needed to engage them in a broader discussion, which we haven't really done. And that's not what this is meant to be. This was meant to be a couple quick hit items, which clearly didn't quite work. But then defer the bigger stuff till next year and put some group together.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we see this as a short-term opportunity to assess what this does, and we come back to it and look at it thoroughly, because I think we have a number of issues that are conflicts. We want to encourage our downtown to be successful and have people come and go and support our businesses, but we also want to reduce the amount of carbon that's going into the air. And we want to be able to, in parking, you know, parking in my mind is not necessarily the answer, or easy parking is not necessarily the answer for a sustainable Hanover. So I think we've got
Or economic development.
Right.
Which tends to, you know, investment in our walking infrastructure tends to be the biggest bang for the buck, and parking is in direct conflict with that. It takes up a lot of space that could otherwise be used in ways that really does bolster the downtown and has been borne out in other places. So economic development, I think, is key, and I think it tends not to point to free parking, which tends to be extremely expensive. That's not to say we need no parking, that's just to say, free parking tends not to be
So
the
free.
answer.
This is a very interesting discussion. I think, this is more like, this is a discussion that is more, I think, appropriate for example, a goal-setting session.
And I think the master plan actually really is looking at that in pretty good detail too.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to move us forward out of this little situation.
Well,
I think, just one second, Carrie. There's no issue with regard to lot 7. Let's just do that. That's the one down there. We need to vote on this, so I'm making my suggestions. And I'm not sure what to do with the parking lot, the parking garage. My way of looking at it, Jenny, what you just said very eloquently, and reinforcing what Joanna just said, I agree with completely.
I don't think we're in a situation right now where we can make the big sweeping policy changes that we need to get us to that situation. So I don't, looking at this issue right now doesn't seem to set us back.
But if we're in a deficit situation in the parking fund and we're not paying staff, why wouldn't we just continue to just collect a couple $100 every Saturday? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know,
I mean, if it's $200, that's like 10 grand.
or 100. Yes. Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's also an equity issue. Like, most of our business comes from people walking on over. And
What do you mean by that one, Jenny?
when you're talking about local dining and shopping, most of the business comes from people who walk there or bike there.
I don't know if we know that. I don't.
We could do a survey and find out. It would be a really good way to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not, I mean, and that's not what I don't think any business owner is gonna agree with
Right.
you.
I think the business owners, I mean, there's been a lot of studies about this, and the business owners in general, not necessarily ours, we could find out from our customers what happened, right? But in other towns where they've done this research, the business owners tend to overstate by a lot how many customers come from a car, and understate by a lot how many customers come from walking and biking. And that's pretty consistent in various towns that they've done the actual surveys of their customers. So that's one thing that we could look into, to see.
Means I'm not.
I guess I'm not following the equity. I mean, parkers pay for parking, so where's the
equity?
Yeah, where's the equity? I'm starting missing that. If you're a walker and not a parker, but finish that sentence for me. If you're a walker and not a parker, what
Because
happens?
we subsidize our parking. The land that we have our parking garage on could be generating revenue. Say that land were an apartment building, say it were the size of Juniper, that would be another, 500 beds, that would be another $45 million in assessment. That would lead to our taxes increasing, right? Instead, that land is not valued at all, and we just look at the revenue kicked off by these spaces, which right now is running a deficit, right? $360,000, right? Or
No.
there is a deficit there
There is a
that has
deficit.
to
It's not running a
be,
deficit,
it's not necessarily running a deficit. Okay. But yeah, because we don't consider the opportunity cost, that parking is being subsidized. The return on investment dollar for dollar is very poor
Okay.
compared to,
But as long as it's a parking lot, I mean, let's just.
yeah, as
not
long
get
as it's
torn
a parking
down
lot.
next week. So,
And say we want people to park there, maybe it shouldn't be priced as high or higher than other lots that are closer to where we think people really want to park. There's a lot of questions.
so are you for or against charging parking on Saturdays?
I think in general, the people using the parking should pay for the parking. Pay for service.
Okay.
I'd be curious to see, I know it's rubbing, I mean, we've invested a lot of money in our parking garage. We've had a lot of membrane issues. I don't really know. I don't have enough information going back to when it was built to know how much it's generated versus like the debt service and all the investment
Oh, we
going
used
into it.
to be very much in the black until the pandemic, where we incurred that incredible deficit.
Yeah. It's just like when it's at really high use, then nobody wants to cut parking, right? Because it's in really high use, and now it's not in really high use, and we're talking about making it cheaper to draw people in. I'm wondering what's the attachment to parking when we're talking about all these other things that we maybe rather have.
But just to be,
Go ahead, Alex.
so it's not an attachment to parking, it's trying to get cars out of so having people go to a garage instead of parking on a meter spot on the street is better from a carbon standpoint and from a pedestrian safety standpoint, right? Because that person circling around trying to find a meter space, they're not going to do that if there's a free place that they can park a few blocks away. And so the problem with free parking, right, isn't having free parking, it's having free parking in the wrong places. And all we were trying to do is a very small thing just to see if this would make a positive benefit of getting some of the cars that park for longer periods of time that our parking enforcement knows, because they're ticketing them over and over and over again. And we know there's a couple areas that we're trying to work on. People who work in the downtown and getting them employee permits so that they're not feeding the meter all day, which is very expensive to do for them. And it's not really great for the business. It's not really great for anybody to kind of have it set up that way. So all we're trying to do is just do small things with, and that was intended to not make a big issue, because there is a big issue, but I think we're not quite ready to deal with all of those things yet. We need a little bit more time to, I mean, there's a lot to do to figure out how we reorganize parking. And so I would just throw the 2 cents out that it would be interesting, because the signs are already up, whether that was, you know, the right process we followed or not. I mean, it seems to some degree clear that it wasn't, but the signs are up, and I might just throw the 2 cents out that we leave it for a couple months and see what happens. We can always change something back if we want to, or if it doesn't work well. But for example, does having the garage free on Saturdays open up more higher turnover for meter spaces in the downtown? If the answer to that is yes, then that's great. And then maybe we focus on moving more cheaper parking out towards the periphery so people don't have to drive into the center, which could also make it easier to do things like create more pedestrian spaces in the core downtown, because then you don't have to drive through it to find the parking, because you could park before you come into the downtown. But just playing around with some of these ideas is part of the goal.
So I recommend we revisit this after the holiday season, which is hopefully a robust one for the merchants, and just see if free parking on Saturday made a difference.
I think that's reasonable.
It didn't make a difference last year when we did the 3 days.
Yeah.
Nancy,
We do that every year.
where do you fall on this, Nancy?
I'm very much in favor of free parking in the garage, and I'm also very much in favor of us talking to our fellow citizens and saying, we, the citizens of Hanover, have a responsibility to park in the garage. I would love to see every space in Main Street and nearby being taken up by out-of-state plates, because I think those are the folks with the interest in patronizing our restaurants and our dress shops and things like that. I think that they're not interested in driving around looking for places, and the more places that we made available for out-of-state patrons, I think everybody's going to be happy.
Civic booster.
Yes. Do your 2 cents and park in the garage.
But I think we should, I can support what Carrie's saying, but I don't necessarily agree. I think people who are coming from New York and Connecticut know how to park in a parking garage. I think there's an aversion. I know from my friends and family, they avoid going to a parking garage just because we're in Hanover. You know, so, I mean, I don't think there's not a lot of logic here. I think there's a
Okay.
lot of research we can do.
Yeah, there's not much.
And I think we should make a
So-
more informed decision
Right,
after I can live with doing it.
so, and then
It's,
Alex, excuse me one second, Jenny. I mean, it would be nice to get some data from our parking folks.
I will,
So if we do this, what is this, October? Do this now, do this until 2024.
right.
Get some data, see how it's going to be skewed data because the college is going to be out of session soon, and even though they just started, and it's the holiday season, but at least we'll get it.
So we can compare to last year's and the year before at the same time at least.
If you.
And if we can have a, if we can have a,
Yeah, I
if we
think
have,
so.
oh gosh, I guess after our budget meetings, if we can have a meeting with parking folks, whoever is running. Who's running parking these days? It's
So we just moved a new sergeant into that
Right.
position, but we're also, well, I don't want to get ahead of my skis here. We have some ideas for this budget year about ways to help try to. There's clearly a sort of long-term planning parking related need.
right.
That we
So
have.
is that Jenny? Does
oh, I
that,
just had one more question. You mentioned something about something changing for staff of downtown businesses in the parking garage.
I think did you mean the permits for?
The employees, I just don't
Not
know.
town employees, like business employees, yeah.
What is that?
We have maybe 20 people or so per day who work in businesses who feed the meters all day and routinely get tickets and get boots on their car, and it's super, and it's a more, so even if they didn't, it's still more expensive. And we have not succeeded, even though we've worked with some of the owners of some of the businesses who have the employees who do that. Some of those business owners have even offered to pay for the permits for their employees, so they would be $0 for them, and the employees don't want to do it. And we're having a little trouble figuring out exactly what's going on. But there's about 20 or so cars that are in our lots that are feeding the meters all day that are people who work in businesses downtown. And we'd like to move them into a cheaper, longer term lot.
Because Jane, there are,
Yeah.
there are parking, permits, like there are
Right.
the permits along Hovey for Hanover High students
Right.
that, these
Yeah.
employees can use.
And it would be better for them.
Yeah, and
money-wise,
that
at least.
a lot of employees would be very happy
Yeah,
to.
I mean, I've heard from some business owners that they've been unable to purchase employee permits, like that there weren't any left in the garage for them to purchase.
That is
So I was just wondering,
interesting.
We should,
Yeah,
we should look
what-
at.
yeah, you could send them, if you come across that, send them to me and I'll get
sure.
them to the right people in parking. Because I do think we have availability, and we're trying, I mean, we've met with several business owners, like individually, to try and say, can you get your employees to
Yeah.
buy the permits instead? And they said, we'll buy it for them. And so I don't know if it's at the end of the night, people don't feel comfortable walking back to car, like, we just need to figure out, because it would open up like 20 spaces in the downtown, which would be really nice.
okay. Would somebody like to carve a motion for these 3 points? Anybody?
I'm just looking at you.
Yeah, you are. Sure. Motion to make the Hanover Town Parking Garage free on Saturdays, to convert Lot 7 from 2 hours to 10 hours,
And say
Convert the bank.
to convert the Bank of America Fleet Deck lot back to 10 hours from the current 3 hours.
Okay.
on a trial basis, right? That's what we agreed
On a-
to?
On a trial basis to be revisited in early 2024.
So second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
I
Opposed? Okay, that wasn't supposed to be our longest agenda item.
We'll get better at timing these out on the,
I'm kidding. It was a very valuable discussion, and I really, seriously, non-sarcastically, appreciated all of it. I think there's so much we need to talk about, so many places we need to go, and so much, we all have goals. Which brings us to minutes. First, we'll take up September 11th, 2023.
And Chair, may I ask, we have 2 sets of minutes there. You might be curious as to why. if you could please, I think there's a link you can go in and make an edit. I think Jenny did this. But if you could go in and also add, if you have changes, and remember to do that, that would be helpful. So.
Oh, darn, I should have
Where,
had changes.
You got changes.
But not until the 18th, the 11th, I was
okay, so
fine.
let's take up the, where did we get that link, Carrie? She sends it out?
She sends it out as, the minutes, yep.
Okay. So we have, so these changes in red are Jenny's, is that correct? That was the question?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I move that we approve the September 11th minutes as presented,
As amended.
as
As
amended.
amended, yeah. I'll second that. I'm just reading the changes that Jenny added. And did we get all the names spelled correctly? I think we did. Yes, it looks good. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now we'll move to the 18th. So you've got some, excuse me, edits.
Yeah, and I can put them in the minutes, log on, but just so you know, it was on, when we were talking about the town office spaces, town hall spaces, and I recommended hiring a consultant. It wasn't just any consultant, it was like somebody that can help clearly articulate the program or the needs for people in town hall, like how many desks do you really need, how many private offices do you need, are there any shared opportunities, are there people who work 3 days and then another person works 2 days so they could share an office, and then that same consultant could help come up with solutions. So clearly articulate the problem or the demand that you have and come up with some options. So that was the thinking in terms of having a consultant for the town hall space to help do it.
So how do you want to put that succinctly?
So I'll just write it, but I just wanted everyone to know
So it's like
that it wasn't-
a space consultant, and then for the demand and for solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
I
a
added the
space and it's
consultant.
like an architect, someone who knows spaces. So the idea is not just any consultant, it's somebody who actually knows how to do this kind of work to help the town, help you guys figure out your space problem,
Any other edits that we need?
our space problem.
Then I move that we, what do we do with these? We accept them? No, we
Adoption.
adopt?
As amended.
Yes, and I'm trying to get the verb here though.
Move to accept the
Accept,
minutes
I guess.
of September 18th as amended. Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
Okay, all right. Yes, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Where's my agenda? So we have consent, and there are two items on consent. We are tabling or removing item number 3. So the first one is donations, and I will read those after the consent agenda has been adopted. And there's a banner request for the consent. I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Items 1 and 2.
Items 1 through 2, yes, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And with regard to the donations, these are just wonderful, and they are greatly appreciated. We have a few, and I will read them. Etna Library has received a donation in the amount of $300 from the New Hampshire Humanities Council in support of ongoing programs at the library. And a second donation is from Jerry and Pat Balcom in the amount of $100. And Hanover Parks and Rec continues to receive donations, and that is wonderful and greatly appreciated. There's one for $250 from Whitcomb Property Services, $250 from Still North's Books and Bar, and $450 from Supreme Mechanical. And those are all to support the youth athletic teams. And greatly appreciated. Moving us to item number 8, which I just clicked off, so we better do it. Town manager report.
Before you
Did
go
I
on,
forget something?
because we removed number 3, are you going to mention why or later, or give us any indication of what happened to that under
We're going to bring that
cellar doors?
back for further discussion, and not in a consent. That'll be an agenda item for an upcoming meeting. Do you guys want to discuss that a little further?
We could.
I mean, we're going to bring it back, but
Yeah, so you might recall that in 2021, this board, not this board as constituted, but put forward a warrant article which was voted upon for
I
bond.
recall all that very vividly, yes.
Bond for bridges in the amount of $950,000. Not all $950,000 was drawn, and at the end of 1 year, that loan facility, and Ellen, correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but that loan facility ceased to be available to the town. So that was a very favorable 2% interest rate.
Right.
So that was not drawn down. So the facility still exists, but not the same interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
So we can again borrow from Mascoma, but at a 3.5% interest rate. So for the remainder, which is 630,000. Sorry.
2/3.
2/3 of the facility is going to be at a higher interest rate.
Right. Okay.
we'll have a chance to discuss that further, Nancy. We're not going to.
I've listened, I've learned.
Yep.
I'm fine.
Yes.
Great. Thank
I'm
you.
cool.
Town manager report.
We'll be on for the next one. In the meantime, if you want to listen to our on the Hanover Happenings podcast, a great conversation with Rob Gerwitt that I really enjoyed. We walked around Pine Park and had an interesting conversation about how Daybreak started, and journalism and trust and community building in the Upper Valley. And then one I'm posting tomorrow is the one I sent to you all last week, which is a couple quick interviews with a handful of town managers from the ICMA conference in Austin. So if people are sad they didn't get to hear a town manager report tonight, you can go hear me talk plenty on the podcast, and I'll have my report next week.
Thank you. Select board reports. Carrie.
Hanover Finance Committee met. I'm trying to remember, it's the last Thursday of September. It's always the last Thursday. And there was I think the key point is there was a desire to be a part of the budget dialogue process. They typically are as the final budget is presented, but even prior to that, like a couple of weeks prior, and then also typically in the fall. Historically, there had been a 5-year outlook, and there'd been some discussion of what the tax rate would be over a 5-year look, including year one. And they're looking for something like that this fall, where they can be part of the dialogue.
Carrie,
Yes.
wanted to add that 2 years ago, not this past year, but the year prior, they attended or somebody did, mostly it was Kari Osmos, and after every meeting, at least one select board member would say thank you to them and thank you for involving yourself early in the process and so forth. And it was a really, it made a big change in the attitudes, excuse me, both the select board and the finance committee. And it was a really, a sea change in relationships.
Yes, positive dynamic.
It made a difference from the select board's standpoint.
So they
Feel
should be invited to
necessary.
November 6th meeting.
Yep.
So I think the November 6th meeting looks like it's shaping up to be a substantive conversation around the budget, maybe the tax rate.
Do you want to reach out to them, or do you want Ellen or I to invite?
I think it'd be great if you invited.
Okay. We can do that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and we're very open. I mean, we're kind of falling into the budget process this year again. But if at any point there's things that you all were hoping that we were going to do that we're not doing, but that we were going to do last year but didn't do last year, just please feel free to bring it up. I don't think we're going to catch everything ourselves from a process standpoint. So So that's a good one.
And members of the finance committee feel very, I think, I mean, they have previously felt very comfortable with the informal nature of the fact that things are evolving. They're not a hidebound people, or we're trying to.
Oh, it sounds like there might be
less
more.
to be.
Right.
Good group of people.
Yeah, and they were super valuable last year in the budget process, and
Yes.
so any way that we can include anybody that we should.
Carrie, anything further? No. Great, John?
Nothing to report.
Do I have anything to report? No, we talked about that. I guess not. It's been busy. I can report that it's been busy.
Oh, I have one thing. The Hanover Sustainability Master Plan Committee is meeting in here tomorrow at 5 o'clock just to do last minute preparations for next week's public forum, which Carrie shared with us, that happens on the 18th and 19th of October at the Hanover Room.
Great, thank you.
Nothing to report.
We have a Dresden walk and roll on October 29th.
What's that?
That's an open streets event from 12 p.m. till 2 p.m. There'll be like games, Bill Young cheering people on, and the neighborhood, so that people can do little obstacle courses and basically have some fun using the streets in ways that they may not otherwise use them. The Kilton Library.
Costumes, right? Costumes.
It's costumes. It's not a trick or treat event, but it is a costume event. It's a good place to practice your skills.
Right.
Where's that being held?
In the Dresden neighborhood.
Is it on Dresden? Is it between the Ray School and middle school on that
I think
street, or
that's
is
where
it the whole thing?
it usually is
Okay.
on that, and I think they try to do the whole loop, but
Yep.
it just depends where they negotiate with HPD where they can set up and what
Yep.
they can effectively traffic calm so that it's a totally safe event.
Awesome.
The Kilton Library in Lebanon got insurance finally, so it looks like the Upper Valley for e-bikes. So it looks like they will be hosting the Upper Valley e-bike lending library, which did not have a home. And this was in part made possible, not the insurance, but the 3 bikes were donated from a Hanover resident. So I want to thank Doug Diat for doing that. So I think they now have 5 bikes, and they'll be starting to lend them out more on the regular rather than whenever the library goes to different towns. So more on that as we learn more on how that will operate. The Transportation Management Association is going to hold their monthly meeting in Hanover so they can do a walking tour and see all the awesome things that we did for
Sorry.
walking and biking.
What?
The Transportation Management Association is a group under Vital Communities that gathers people interested in transportation from Hanover and other towns. It sort of covers the Upper Valley the same way Vital Communities does. And they have a meeting every month, and it's just, they're doing something different, and they were attracted to our map of bike and walk friendly places, so that they're gonna take a little tour. So I thought that was kind of fun. And when we got our counts in for the Dunster-Wyeth crosswalk for the Upper Valley Regional Transportation Commission, so that's really exciting because we had 134 people were crossing between 4 and 6. And they had some other interesting observations. They really wrote a pretty detailed report, and they also wanted to know if we, and I can pass it along to everyone, if we have other questions, they said they would, return to the data and look that up too, if we needed that. I think they got 6, they did a Wednesday, I don't remember if they did a Tuesday or Wednesday and Wednesday or Thursday. They did 2 days. And I guess it depended on the Dartmouth schedule. One day was a little higher than the other day. One day had 68 bikes and another day had 37 bikes. One had 134 people moving around that intersection. One had 114. And then they had,
That's a lot.
yeah, they had the comparable number of cars that they get during their regular counts of cars on that road. Let me see, and then, yeah, there's just a lot of positive activity. There's a group of Hanover residents and a group of Lebanon residents trying to fund a feasibility study to connect West Leb and Hanover to see if they could do a feasibility study, then maybe they can move that further. And I think that's exciting that those are just a bunch of citizens, and they've been contacting Hanover Bike Walk and Lebanon Bike Walk and keeping them abreast of what they're doing. That's kind of exciting. That's that. Yeah, and then people are looking forward to the traffic safety report. I get questions that it's coming sometime this October, right, Alex?
That is the goal.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be, how often would you anticipate that recurring? Like,
Right now we have quarterly meetings set up.
yeah, okay.
So that we had our meeting at the end of September, so I'll either have that for next Monday or the meeting on November 6th.
Great.
Is that it, Jen? More?
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, that's such a tough corridor between West Leb and Hanover. It's just awful on a bike. Absolutely awful.
I for just a second, I forgot something that came up in the downtown Hanover meeting is that there's going to be a Halloween on Allen Street.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
October. Did you want to talk about it?
No.
Oh, okay. October 27, 28, sponsored mainly by your rec department, and lots of different activities for both children, and on the 28th, primarily grown-ups, and everybody's encouraged to wear costumes all over town, as is their wont.
So what are the hours for that? So Friday?
Friday,
I don't have the hours.
Okay.
It's going to be Friday evening,
Uh-huh.
and Saturday I think is going to be middle of the day. Is
Right,
that your?
right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll have those for next
They'll get
week.
out more information
Yeah,
as we
yeah.
get closer to the time.
Bristol,
I'm
yeah.
excited to see that one. I didn't make the last, but
The town of Newburyport, they do this huge Halloween. Every business like decorates itself, and little kids go trick-or-treating, and it transforms their downtown. I mean, it's really, and it's a pretty fun event. I was there last year and I was like, holy moly, what are all these spiders doing here?
So we should all use a new word for it.
So hopefully Allen Street will be equally fun.
Yeah.
sorry.
So, there has been a request for non-public session for items pursuant to RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, A, B, D, E, L. It's not alphabetical though.
No, it's not.
Is that an I at the end?
Yes.
I believe they're all uppercase.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yes.
And I.
Yeah.
Carrie.
Callahan, yes.
Joanna Whitcomb, yes.
Office Trustees, yes.
Nancy Carter, yes.
Jenny Chamberlain, yes.